Newsday, 26th of September 2023, China advances its hegemonic agenda on the global scene. Beijing enjoys pointing the finger. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, claims that the USA is the worst hegemonic power in the world. China may have a point. DC enjoys using its political clout, but Beijing is a formidable rival in the race to unseat the United States as the dominant nation and create a new international order. At the last BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, Chairman Xi Jinping asserted that hegemonism is not in China's DNA. However, this contrasts sharply with China's actions along the Indian border and in the South Sea. In these domains, China fabricates new facts out of thin air, upholds the idea that strength always wins, and enforces the rule of the jungle on its own. These are the acts of a hegemonistic, renegade state. However, China also presents its aspirations in a diplomatically acceptable manner. China's foreign ministry released a comprehensive proposal for the reform and development of global governance on September 13, continuing its latest march towards overthrowing the current global order and establishing supremacy. The Global Security Initiative, GSI, Global Development Initiative, GDI, Data Security Initiative, DSI, and Global Civilization Initiative, GCI, are among China's main objectives, together with the United Nations and the Global South. The Center for China Analysis's executive director, Batesville, stated, "I think it was different in many ways, even though much of the proposal is familiar in many of its themes. Firstly, its reach was broad, as it demanded that the international community embrace a far more equitable, fair, and multilateral set of solutions concerning regional and global security and development concerning the tolerance of various social, cultural, and political systems worldwide. Ironically, China is currently one of the world's most intolerable governments." Gill went on, "This document did not stop short of criticizing, with some harshness, what it called a certain country, which I believe we should interpret to mean the United States, for what it called, among other things, hegemonic behavior and bullying, which the proposal believed to be impeding progress towards stability and development. China's suggestion is both unrealistic and far-reaching. It said, for instance, that the common goal of humanity is human rights for all, in addition to ensuring that the people govern the nation, enjoy human rights equally, and take the lead in advancing those rights. We also need to protect people's democratic rights and fully encourage their drive, initiative, and inventiveness. This is wild coming from a totalitarian government that forgoes democracy and imposes harsh laws. Even still, many people will be willing to accept China's plan despite its apparent contradictions. China intends to impose its narrative on the UN Security Council by utilizing its rotating chairmanship. China is repurposing current initiatives under the GSI, GDI, and GCI names, just as it did with the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. China intends to vigorously promote these measures in various global platforms such as BRICS, bilateral diplomatic ties, and the UN. It's interesting to note that China's international image no longer revolves around the BRI. It is but one path next to the global public good, the GSI, GDI, and GCI. Since China focuses more on these projects, many believe the BRI is diminishing. According to Caleb Land, a Schwartzman scholar at the Asia Society Policy Institute's Center for China Analysis, Chinese officials aim to strengthen their influence in international forums, particularly the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. But it does require support to accomplish it. And there's no better way to achieve it than by reaching out to 152 developing nations in dire need of aid. Furthermore, China is dedicated to using its initiatives to promote and support these countries' growth and development. China is also aware that the world's largest and fastest-growing region is the Global South, which may benefit from new economic opportunities and garner the most international support. Even though China will be welcomed with open arms by many, the following warning was issued by Courtney Fung, an associate professor in Macquarie University's Department of Security Studies and Criminology. "I don't want to give you the impression that this is all some sort of top-down orchestration without any potential pushback. Concerns are already being raised, and boundaries are being somewhat tightened in the human rights domain regarding allowing GCI terminology to enter and pass through the UN Human Rights Council without any inquiry or explanation." According to Fung, these measures are both flexible and ambitious. Yet, they are also broad enough to address China's shortcomings and dispel doubts about its unique domestic and international record while advancing China's unique approach. This recently published plan on the reform and development of global governance highlights Xi's transition from concept to reality. China is constantly reaffirming its terminology and methodology to create a global governance structure that it can control. Even while China lacks deeply ingrained alliances, carefully structured agreements can allow some room for collaboration on specific problems. Moving away from a US-led, Western-led order and toward one that will give China more room to maintain its correct position, that is, to be recognized as the pole position in international politics, Fung went on, saying, "This is building upon China's view that it's now going to be a leading reformer of the global governance system, a United Nations that reflects today's global distribution of power." Although China is trying to put up a cheerful face for its plan, the reality is that the CCP's form of government, one in which a single individual has absolute power, is encountering increasing difficulties. Bland emphasized, China needs to get its domestic stability together to have a stable environment and commit an advanced self on the international stage. That is clearly beyond the international community's control in certain respects, and President Xi will need to address it personally. Furthermore, the governance proposal lacks apparent or anticipated easy application and traction. Fung stated, "It is important to note that China is still in the weaker position. The first GSI output from April last year came across as quite defensive." COVID and international censure of China's stance on Russia's Ukraine incursion. "We need to remember again," Fung stated, "that these kinds of setbacks could happen and that China needs to be presenting its best face in terms of adaptable, tasteful diplomacy while allowing it to try and thread a skinny needle. China still needs to deal with these hardline domestic concerns and its general apprehension about how its reputation may be impacted domestically and internationally." Authoritarians find China's solutions appealing, but the CCP is becoming more and more at odds with Western values. For example, the country's objective is to goodly use the rule of law as a weapon and constantly enrich and improve the legal toolbox for foreign struggles, according to a recent statement by International Minister Wang Yi. He was saying that the CCP is using its laws as a weapon against people, companies, governments, and anybody else it deems to be an enemy of the people. Chinese lawfare attempts to restructure power and economic relationships to establish a system with Chinese characteristics. This year's new foreign relations law and the revised counter-espionage law are two examples of domestic laws proposed to further territorial and extraterritorial advantages. Under the previous legislation, China aimed to uncover espionage, but it also targeted any documents, data, materials or items related to national security or interests. Therefore, anything the CCP says constitutes national security. The latter law further states that foreigners and foreign organizations operating in mainland China must abide by Chinese law and not jeopardize national security, damage society's public interest, or threaten social order. International companies operating in China are already experiencing the heat. Authorities have conducted raids on consulting firms, including Mintz, Bain, and Capvision, and the CCP has mandated that executives from American multinational investment firms Franklin Templeton and BlackRock attend seminars on Xi Jinping thought. A third of their working hours should be spent researching the CCP leader. Attendance is required, and students must write papers summarizing their learning. The goal of Xi's legal pogrom is to produce a void in the information that he could then fill with stories influenced by the CCP that would strengthen his warped viewpoint. The goal is whatever the CCP thinks is best for its continued survival, not what is true. Because Chinese enterprises are racing to comply with Chinese legal requirements, which differ significantly from disclosure norms set by Western standards, there is a shortage of accurate data about Chinese companies. China's economy is collapsing due to pressures from an elderly population growing faster than ever and an increasingly expensive labor force. Party committees stifle innovation while thousands of person-hours are squandered studying Xi Jinping thought instead of concentrating on productivity. Xi has centralized the party in all facets of Chinese life, utilizing strict policing to maintain population control. Every aspect of society is subject to constant observation, and the media and internet are strictly regulated. The Uyghurs' forced labor programs and detention camps represent the apex of Xi's totalitarian strategy. Nothing is too holy to be under the glowering grip of the CCP. Moreover, Chinese municipal governments strictly enforce ancient Buddhist and Taoist customs like burning offerings and spirit money during the Hungry Ghost Festival. We must consciously resist worship activities with feudal superstitions and break old habits such as burning spirit money, setting off firecrackers, and leaving offerings, a government in one of the countries said, branding them uncivilized. Or consider the CCP's denial of the reality surrounding its disastrous COVID-19 program. According to a recent study by JAMA Network, 1.87 million Chinese people over 30 are thought to have passed away in the first 2 months following Xi's abrupt reversal of his zero-COVID policy. This starkly contrasts the 60,000 COVID-related deaths the Chinese government claimed between early December 2022 and January 12, 2023. The CCP's use of international organizations to promote its falsehoods is another example of its shaky grasp of reality. For instance, China has far more cultural traditions than any other nation and is home to more UNESCO-designated heritage sites than any other nation save Italy. China claims to utilize its UNESCO recognition to promote social peace and national unity. But these are only instruments that the CCP will use to impose its will over Chinese society, with all of its varied ethnic groups, even if it means purposefully falsifying history. There's a noticeable disconnect between what China says and does. While some nations have realized the risks of China's authoritarian style taking root, others are all too ready to put aside their principles and take Chinese money. Beijing, of course, is pointing to this when it flaunts its many plans and programs. We should be able to see from recent history how dangerous it is to put your trust in Xi. In fact, September 25 is the 8th anniversary of Xi's well-known pledge made to President Barack Obama in the White House Rose Garden. China is dedicated to pursuing a peaceful development path and a neighborly foreign policy marked by cooperation and good neighborliness with our neighbors. We are committed to honoring and defending the freedom of overflight and navigation that nations are granted by international law. China is not pursuing militarism, and its pertinent construction projects on the non-Shah Islands don't aim to harm or target any other nation. The world has already seen the result of those false and meaningless promises.